I noticed that no one really talks about the cost of starting a home pottery studio. So today I actually wanted to share with you the cost of what I spent on starting my at-home pottery studio and what I could have actually done without and how much this could actually cost for you. Okay, so let's talk numbers. So y'all, my name is Tova and I'm the owner of Shop St. Florence. I've been documenting my ceramics journey on YouTube and of course all of the book rants and what it's like actually building a small business. But recently I've been doing a series on the finances of selling your pottery in stores. And this is everything from pricing, profit, taxes, all the things. And while working on my taxes and actually looking at the numbers, I realized I could show y'all what I paid to start my studio. I recognize that there's a whole bunch of people out there who are trying to start selling their ceramics, but maybe you don't have access to a space. And maybe this will motivate you to also create a space that works for you in your creative practice. Okay, so let's actually break down the numbers and I want to show you all the different pieces that I got at the same time. Okay, so the main item, of course, is a pottery wheel. I got the Shimpo VL Whisper. I got it new because I wasn't looking for necessarily a used version or a fixer-upper. I've bought cars before that ended up being lemons. And so I just wanted to be really intentional that I didn't want any roadblockers to me actually creating on the wheel. So that's why I just bought a new Shimpo. So full price, it was $18.40 and I received a 20% discount on it. So it was $14.72 end of the day. I also have to pay separately for the stool, which was $98. And then you can kind of see here, kind of done tacky, but it will do. I have some IKEA clear floor mats that were $20. I bought 3 of them and they're around 48 inches each. But the intention was that I didn't want to splatter any of the clay on the wall. And I'm just trying to keep this space, this place that I live, really clean so I can get my deposit back if I ever intend to move. Something to know, I don't actually have a kiln here. I live in a space that electrically it doesn't work. So I choose to just get my pieces fired from different clay stores and ceramic studios that allow for mass production. So, and there's kiln fees, which kind of range from $30 from a bisque fire to up to $200 for like a full kiln fire. It all just kind of depends on the size of pieces that you have that need to be fired. And the bisque fire is usually cheaper because you can stack all of your pieces together versus glaze fire. Of course, you know that the glaze sticks to anything, so the pieces have to be separated, which takes up more space within the kiln. I would love to have my own kiln, but this is just where I'm at right now, and just some things have to give. Okay, and so at my pottery wheel, I also have a whole bunch of different tools. I have a whole bunch of sculpting tools to throw on the wheel. I have a scraping tool, rib tools, just ready to go. And a lot of those tools I already had, so I didn't have to pay for those things. But if you are starting from scratch, maybe your studio had tools and so you've never had to buy them out personally, you can buy that in a kit of about $20. At the end of the day, I did buy some additional tools. I bought a rib tool for $7.75. I bought a wire cutter, which is not up here. I bought 2 wire cutters. One was $7.75 and another one was $5. One I wanted to keep separate for just cutting my clay out of the bag, while another one I wanted to use at the wheel for throwing. I also bought a wheel scraper. It was $5.05. And I bought an art tube to just like put all the stuff in. I don't use this often, but you can kind of see that it has been used. And this was $6.75. So if anything, I could, at the end of the day, just stack all of my different tools inside of this thing if I wanted to be organized. I also bought a caliper tool. So here it is. It's just to help measure at the wheel so you can make more consistent pieces. Of course, because you're creating a series to sell in bulk. Here's the wire cutter. The one I use at the wheel is like a thick wire, and it's a bit more sturdy versus another one is made out of plastic. Also started with 2 bags of clay. I got a dragon fruit and a B-mix. B-mix was $31 and the dragon fruit was $34, but you can kind of see over time I've been collecting clay and I leave the bottom shelf just for all of my different clays. You're gonna need sponges, and I did have those already. So total, I would say that all of the tools that you would need are gonna cost about $130. I spent $102.44, acknowledging I had a few of those items on just clay tools alone. Ta-da! So this is my cabinet of glazes, and as you can see, it's kind of stacking up. It's getting a little bit chaotic in here. I don't think you need to start with a lot. All you need is one glaze that you're going to use for this series. All you need is one. Glazes are around $20 to $30, and you do need a glaze brush. I bought a Mako 10 fan brush for $10. All you need is about $35 to get what you need to get done for glazing. I did buy a few additional things and I'll explain what they were, but breaking it down, this is what I spent on glazing. I bought tongs, never use them because I realized I don't dip while I'm at home. I only dip while I'm in the studio. So all of my glazes are brush on glazes, so I've never used this tool. This was $17.89. For brushes, I also have a whole bunch of other different types of brushes. I have some more detailed brushes. I've been just using the brushes that I use for painting, and I think they work just as fine. I bought a Shimpo banding wheel that is great and is so useful. I don't think it's necessary, but it's a very nice to have. I spent $71 on it, and of course there are other more cost-efficient options for buying a banding wheel. I also bought wax resist, and I forgot how much this was. I want to say it was like $5. Let's say it's $5. You can get this honestly anywhere, and also it's not necessary. You can wipe off the bottoms of your glazed pieces without using a wax. And then there's Magic Mender. I used this to fix greenware pieces. I haven't found it to work that great. Actually, it works great if you use apple cider vinegar. So maybe I should add apple cider vinegar to this, but that was $27.99 for a Magic Mender. Okay, so in total, I spent $184 for all of the glaze supplies that I needed to get started. And of course, you can kind of see I've been collecting things over time. I've been doing this for over 11 years now, and so I've been collecting things. Also, you can do a swap with a friend, and it's kind of fun to just try new glazes out. Okay, I also made my own recycling clay area. I also have it off to the side, just placed in a box, so you can kind of see it there. It's a bit of a mess. And this is some old clay that I forgot to actually recycle. And I also used the plaster to create little molds for hand building activities. So the pairs of plaster cost $6.99 each for just a small tiny box. I bought 3 boxes. And the cleaning supplies I use for recycling my clay are plastic containers. I got a few at the hardware store, and I spent $7.47 for 3 for a 2.5 quart container. I also spent $10.77 for 3 5-quart containers. It wasn't enough. I still eventually bought more plastic containers. Actually, they're just buckets, and I spent $2.99 for 2 more there. It's actually important to have a lot of these plastic buckets. Something to note here, since yes, I'm just living in an apartment, I don't want to actually put in a clay trap at my sink. I don't want to use my sink at all for cleaning any of my products. So I'm cleaning all of my clay and my wheel from the clay buckets and gray water. I also allow the clay to settle at the bottom from these buckets and siphon out the water from the top and just recycle that and water my plants with that. So I'm never putting anything down the pipes of my sinks, and this just allows for like a full recycled sustainable process in my home. As far as other tools, I forgot to mention that you're going to need bats. I had a few bats, and bats are those circle things to place your pieces on and allow them to dry slowly. I like the MDF ones, and I actually bought 2 for $5 each. And then of course I eventually bought the Studio Pro bats. Those were kind of expensive. It's just nice to have, so you definitely don't need these. But I spent $73.99 on those. Of course you're gonna need a wedging mat, and I originally had this duct tape down to the table so I can wedge on this table. However, this table's not that sturdy, and as far as getting a table, yes, you're going to need a very sturdy table to wedge on, but I just decided I'm going to wedge on the floor. So I took off my mat and placed it on the floor when I'm ready to wedge. I have a light mat for light clay and another mat for dark clay. I spent $12 each for each mat. And then another thing That's important. Of course, you just need like a pencil. Any pencil will do. Um, I have an underglazed pencil as well, as far as just like writing on the bottoms when I'm like creating test samples or if you forgot to put your signature on it. I was actually surprised to learn that an underglazed pencil was $23.95. That's kind of expensive just for a pencil. But I mean, it's not just a pencil, but it's kind of expensive. But overall, to buy all of those things, I spent $167.43. I, of course, don't think you need all of those things. I think in total to make all of these tools and bats work, you only need $125. And then, of course, back to the work tables. I've had these work tables for a really long time and this work shelf. I actually got it originally for selling my work at craft fairs. I wanted something very like clean and bright, and I thought this looked nice. So I actually take, the frustrating thing is I take these two pieces down when I'm going to a craft fair. And it's kind of chaotic because it just means everything in this area needs to be cleaned up, but it allows me to refresh my studio and keep my studio clean, because if I'm going to sell at a craft fair, all of this has to be cleaned off. These originally, I think this table was $200 and this shelf was $150. But the table, I'm sure you can find a table for about $100. You can find this used or even make your own table. So let's say you're spending about $100 for your table and maybe $75 to $100 for a utility size shelf to store your work on as you're working. Yeah, so you can kind of see I use two separate spaces of my apartment just because this is what works and these are where actually the outlets are. And I like the light that's coming in here to hand build so I can open it up and have ventilation while I'm working. It's great. It's really important that you do have some sort of ventilation, especially if you are doing your pottery at home, just because we're not bringing in any silica dust and to the place that you're going to live every day 24/7. Something I would note, I included having an air purifier in this list. I actually had mine for a really long time, and so it's more for me just replacing the filter. Expect to pay something around $300 for an air purifier just to make sure that you're living in a very habitable space, something where you're very much taking care of your body too. Okay, so here are the totals. Are you ready? I think what you really need is about $2,530. I spent $2,044 and some change, acknowledging that I had a few of these items, so I took out the cost of the table, the shelves, air purifier, some of those things that I already had. But expect to pay up to about $2,500 for your studio if you're just getting started. And I guess like overall, I kind of think about the life cycle cost. I think about if I was still at a pottery studio, maybe spending about $200 per month for a membership. Is it actually worth having a studio at home? Like, am I reducing my cost? Although $2,000 feels like a lot, you're able to come home and just jump on the wheel anytime you want. There's the limiting factors of the hours of operation of going to a community art studio. And I also felt like when I was having like maybe a bad day from work, then I could immediately just jump on the wheel myself to have a therapeutic moment on the wheel. So I would say for me, it's been perfect and the best thing I could have ever done to get my studio set up here. And this is kind of why I go back to the cost of why you need to price your things and sell your things at a reasonable price so you can actually pay and afford the operational expenses that you're paying up front. But again, of course, this is just my path, and I acknowledge that many of us have different paths. We live in different areas, and the cost of goods may be even priced differently. And I guess this is a disclaimer to say that there are so many ways to approach building out your pottery studio, especially if maybe you were focused on hand building. And I'm not saying that my way is necessarily the right way. This is just what I did to get started. So I'm curious if you have started your own pottery studio at home, how much you spent, and I would love to know like what you could have done differently, or maybe even what are some of your favorite items. Yeah, because I just would love to compare notes with you. All right, so thanks for watching, and I will see y'all on the next video.